Okay, this is your project for week 7. So I'm just going to go through the steps in the order that you are asked to go through the steps on your project description for week 7. And as always, if you have any questions, just let me know. Hopefully the explanations and the demonstrations are helpful to you. So first, you need to state the null and alternative hypothesis, and I specify, make sure that you're using the independent variable with 3 categories, and then your dependent variable. So for me, my independent variable with 3 categories was religion, and I had measured that as 1 being very religious, 2 being somewhat religious, and 3 being not religious. And then my dependent variable is death penalty attitudes. So my null hypothesis of no relationship states that there is no relationship between religion and death penalty attitudes, that religion cannot be used to predict people's attitudes toward capital punishment. The research or the alternative hypothesis would be that I believe that the more religious that people identify themselves as, the more support that they will exhibit for capital punishment. So put simply, more religious people are going to be more likely to support capital punishment than less religious people. Step 2, I need to identify the distribution and compute degrees of freedom. Since I'm going to be running an analysis of variance on these 2 variables, I would use the F distribution. And as far as computing degrees of freedom, I have 3 groups, so K equals 3, because remember the 3 groups are very religious, somewhat religious, and not religious. And my sample size, even though I told you guys in SPSS I only made up 55, I think, observations, I'm saying that I have 100. So excuse me, my N, or my sample size, is going to be 100. So computing the degrees of freedom, the degrees of freedom for the between is K minus 1, which K is 3, so 3 minus 1 is 2. So the degrees of freedom for between is 2, and the degrees of freedom for within is N minus K. N is 100, K is 3, so 100 minus 3 is 97. So the degrees of freedom for within would be 97. Step 3 is to identify the critical value and state the decision rule. So if I'm using alpha as 0.05 and I use the values of degrees of freedom above, which are 2 and 97, I went to the table in the back of the book and I received an F critical value of 3.07. So 3.07 is my critical value, and the decision rule is if the obtained value of F is greater than 3.07, which is that critical value, then I will reject the null hypothesis of no relationship and say that my research hypothesis is supported. And then the last thing I need to do is run an analysis of variance and relate my output to the actual F value that is obtained to the critical value and decision rule that I just talked about. So I'm now going to share my screen. Let's see. Okay. And I'm going to run an analysis of variance. So I go to Analyze, Compare Means, One-Way ANOVA. My dependent list, you guys will have, your variables will not be moved over yet. The factor is the independent variable. So this is religion for me. So that's my independent variable. And my dependent variable is attitudes toward capital punishment. That's annoying. And then I'm going to go to post hoc tests, and I requested a Tukey test. I don't require you to do this in your assignment. You may want to do it. It would enhance your interpretation, but you're not required to. I'm just going to talk very briefly about it just to show you what it looks like. But like I said, you're not required to do this. The significance is set at 0.05, and I mentioned before that I had, when I looked up the critical value, that I had selected the alpha level at 0.05. If you select alpha as 0.01, then you would just manually change this to 0.01. But since I selected 0.05 when I did the critical value, I'm going to leave this at 0.05. I'm going to hit continue. I'm going to hit, I don't know what the problem is with this mouse. Okay, I'm going to hit OK. Oh crap, wait a second. What the hell? Sorry, I don't know why it stopped sharing. That was very strange. Let me see if I can go back to it. This mouse is crazy. God. All right, hold on. Let me stop the share. I'm so sorry. I don't know what the problem is with this mouse. Okay, let's try this one more time. Share screen. Okay, so let's try this again. Analyze, compare means, one way and analyze, compare means, one-way analysis of variance. This should all be set. I'm just going to hit OK. There we go. So I look now, and my F value is 3.708, which is greater than 3.07. Remember, 3.07 was my critical value. So I am going to reject the null hypothesis because my obtained value okay. I don't know. It told me at the sharing pause, so I'm just going to start over with this part of the interpretation. The analysis of variance, let's see, analyze descriptives. I'm sorry, compare means. One-way analysis. It's saying please move this window away from the shared application. I don't know why it's doing that. Okay, maybe that's what it wants me to do. Okay. Now, anyway, I apologize for that. Now you see the output. My obtained F value is 3.708. That obtained value is greater than my critical value of 3.07. So I would say that because my obtained value is greater than my critical value, that I reject the null hypothesis and that my research hypothesis is supported. And if you look, you can double check this to make sure it's right. The output tells you whether it's significant, and it is significant. So this is a p-value, this SIG. So because this is less than 0.05, you would say that this relationship is statistically significant, and that you reject the null, and that your research hypothesis is supported. So what we looked at in the book and how we compared this to the critical value, this significance level supports that. Now, if the significance had been like 0.08 or 0.54 or something like that, if it had been greater than 0.05, then something would have been wrong. Because this was greater than the critical value, this should be statistically significant. So the significance is just a way for you to double check yourself. And then just real quick, you can look at the post hoc test, and you can see, just like your book talked about, the significant difference. So you can see the significance levels. Anything less than 0.05 is statistically significant. So you can see the values that are less than 0.05 right here and right here have to do with differences between not religious people and very religious people. So you would say that yes, the hypothesis is supported, but it's between those two groups. So the significant difference in capital punishment attitudes is between very religious people and not religious people. So the somewhat religious people are not significantly different from the other groups. So that's what the post hoc test does. But again, you should know that just from your book. This should make intuitive sense to you, that you're not required to add this to your project, but you certainly can if you want. I think, okay, yeah, that should fulfill. Yep, that does fulfill the assignment. So you ran the analysis of variance. You related the F value, which is what I talked about before, to the critical value. So I showed you that my obtained value was greater than the critical value. And my decision rule was that if it was greater, that I would reject the null and accept my research hypothesis, which I did. So that's all that you need to do. Okay, again, I apologize for the issues with the mouse and the share screen. Hopefully that wasn't too difficult to follow. If you did struggle or something didn't make sense to you, please just let me know and I will do my best to clarify it. But hopefully this shouldn't be too difficult of an assignment for you guys this week.